Hi everybody, it's Kerrie here at the North East Autism Society, and today we're going to be talking about mate crime, and I have with me the lovely Dr. Amy Pearson from Sunderland University, who is just going to tell us a little bit about herself.
Hi there, so as Kerrie says, I'm Dr. Amy Pearson. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Sunderland, and I do research into autism, looking at the development of relationships, specifically mate crime in autistic adults and younger people.
Okay, so I have heard of the term mate crime and hate crime also, Amy, but I don't know that much about it. So what is mate crime?
So mate crime, it is technically a form of hate crime. So it's kind of defined in the literature as specifically a form of disability hate crime, when the perpetrator who commits a crime is known to the victim. So it tends to be criminality that occurs within friendships, romantic relationships, and sometimes even kind of care-based relationships with family. And it tends to center on exploitation, humiliation, and taking advantage of a person for personal gain. It can include both criminal and non-criminal acts. So it might involve things like, getting someone to steal for you, or getting someone to kind of traffic drugs at the most extreme points. But it can also just involve things like kind of physical and emotional abuse as well, which is obviously really unpleasant.
Right, okay, so how prevalent is mate crime in autistic people? Are they particularly vulnerable to this?
It seems so. So some recent research we've been doing found that in the study we had, more than 50% of the autistic adults that we spoke to reported being victimized by someone who was close to them. It was of a much lower proportion in the kind of the non-autistic population. And a lot of them talked about kind of social vulnerability, and maybe difficulty picking up on certain social cues, as well as difficulty with when they have the ability to pick up on those social cues, knowing whether to kind of trust themselves and how to bring up this difficulty with other people. So if you know someone's maybe taking advantage of you, what you do about that, so who you might go to or what you can say to get them to stop.
Okay, right. So why do you think autistic people are more susceptible or more vulnerable, if you like, to mate crime?
So I think it's a combination of factors. One of the things that seem to have come out of our research is that people make a lot of assumptions about autistic people and their ability to recognize certain social cues. So when people talk about kind of social naivety and difficulty with social communication, actually a lot of the time autistic people are very aware of what people are saying or doing. Taking things at face value is one issue. So if you take everything someone says at face value and trust people to be honest, and they're not honest, some people are disingenuous, and that's difficult. But one of the other factors was that these assumptions people make are often based on the idea that autistic people can't read social cues. And so they treat people as if they can't. There's this kind of stigma attached. And that leads to dehumanization. So people seeing autistic people as kind of less than themselves. And that makes them feel more able to try and take advantage. So it's not necessarily that the autistic person isn't picking up the social cues, it's that someone's making assumptions about whether or not they can. And that's kind of one of the driving factors in it, rather than the difficulty with social communication itself.
Right, okay. So I mean, is there anything that people can look out for in terms of, if people are worried about this, identifying that this is happening with their family member? Are there things that might change for the person, like identifying factors?
Yeah, so I think things to watch out for are making kind of unreasonable requests, and these might start off really small. So it's what we sometimes call like a foot in the door request. So it might seem something really little, like, can I lend a fiver? And once you do that once, the person knows that you might be willing to do it again, so they might make bigger and bigger requests. People doing things like showing up on benefits day, or always wanting to bring their friends around to your house, stuff like that. So doing things which in a friendship you might do those things, but usually there's a bit of back and forth. So, if you go out with someone for a coffee, they might buy it one time and you'll buy it the next time. But kind of this consistent of, you're always the one paying for things, you are always the one having to put the effort in. That's something you can watch out for. So that's just kind of one factor. And also people being kind of for want of a better word, nasty. So friends who bully you in, oh, it's just good fun. But if someone says something that makes you feel upset, that isn't very fun. So kind of keeping an eye on, friends tend not to say those kinds of things to each other. It's not reasonable for a friend to make fun of you. And if you tell someone that that thing upsets you, it's not reasonable for them to keep on saying it. So
Yes.
if someone kind of not respecting personal boundaries, is treating you in an exploitative way, I think those are kind of some cues that we can keep an eye out for. That just, if you notice that someone's doing things like that, then it's probably worth telling someone that you do trust.
Of course, yeah. And I think you just touched on something there, Amy. So with the young people, what we try and do, if they need support with it, we'll teach them about what friendships are, because obviously some of our people may struggle with that. So we'll teach them about what is a friendship, how to identify if somebody is not being a good friend, you know, what a good friend and not a good friend looks like. And I think them things at an early age are probably really important, aren't they, in terms of when we're looking at this bigger picture of something like mate crime, which is just awful. I think that kind of early teaching is quite important for some people, you know, if they have them difficulties perhaps. And I know one of your other topics, which we're going to talk about on another video, is masking, but is there a link there in terms of autistic people that really want to fit in and they want that desire to just please people? It's like that, I just want to be with my friends and I'll do whatever I've got to do just to fit into the norm, whatever the norm is. Is there a link there between the two things?
There absolutely is, yeah. It's one of the key driving factors. We've found that this kind of over compliance we sometimes see in people who just really want friends, or again, it's quite I guess a complicated relationship, but people who've grown up feeling like they have to do what someone wants them to in order to fit in or in order to make other people happy. That can lead to this kind of, you know, okay, well, I'll just do what this person says because that's what I'm supposed to do. And we find that really problematic, particularly if we think about things like child therapy. So as you're saying, like, it's really good to teach kids about, you know, what good friendships are. Certain forms of therapy, things like ABA, for instance, that rely on heightened compliance. We see in adults that this could potentially lead to social vulnerability, because if you're so used to just doing what people say that you need to do, then it does make you more vulnerable to people who are really disingenuous. So masking is really important to take into account, and it does seem like there is something there with kind of phoning and people pleasing in order to try and fit in and fly under the radar, so to speak. That can lead to the potential for someone to try and take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I know obviously, just to end, I know you're doing a lot of research, Amy, and this is kind of one of your specialist areas, if you like, but is the wider society taking this on board? Is there, you know, are professionals getting training on this subject?
It's something that's still relatively under researched. There is training going on, and there've been disability activists doing work on this for years, trying to teach people kind of what to look out for and what the signs are. But one of the things that there's been a real lack of, which is what we're trying to bridge that gap with, is there's been very little looking at personal experience. It's obviously not a very pleasant thing to talk about. So if we're asking people to talk about these fairly traumatic experiences that they've had, but knowing the kinds of things that have happened and what people have done to deal with that, so kind of how they've dealt with it afterwards and what's made them feel better, and also kind of, I guess, advice they have that can help us, you know, put things in place to try and reduce this in society and understand what those driving factors are. That you can only really get that from talking to people about their experiences and finding out and really getting their input. And so it's something that I think we're becoming more aware of it, but it's still something that needs a lot of work.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll get some more updates about that from you in the future, Amy. So thank you for talking to us about mate crime in particularly autistic people, and I'm sure we'll see you again very soon. Thanks, Amy. Bye, everybody. Bye.